Hey everybody. So I think I told you that I finally finished reading A Game of Thrones and I posted my review on Patreon first because they get first dibs. So now YouTube gets it and I did post it in two parts on TikTok because it took a while to record everything. So I finally finished it. I think it was I was torn because for a long time I didn't want to read it, but it was better than I thought it was going to be. And it was, of course, better than the TV show. So we picked it as part of my book club read for my Patreon account, which is Book Nerd Maggie 24, in case you ever want to join my Patreon for free or for paid. I'm going to start with the characters. I'm going to talk about a couple of them in a sec, but first I want to talk about how good George R. R. Martin is at writing and creating characters and weaving all of them into the story effectively. There are a ton of characters in this book, main characters, secondary characters, side characters who only get mentioned once or twice and then they're dead, and it's wild. There's even some off page characters that we never see, but every single character he writes fits into the story somehow. Like, it could be like, oh, we're going to talk about Edmure, and you don't see him for 500 pages, And I didn't think that there was a single character that didn't belong. They all fit, and they were all important to the book, even if they were just there so the story to die, so that the story could continue. Because there is a lot of death in these books, and we all know that. When I think about the main characters, like the ones who head each chapter and they're sort of little players in their worlds, I can't help but think of how distinct they all were. He knew where they all grew up. It fits in with his being able to weave these characters in seamlessly. They all stood out as well-played characters who knew who they are and what they want. Some of them are still really young, so they're still developing. And I think even with the child characters, though, there was a little bit of growth, maybe not as much with Sansa, but with some of them there was, and I think even though there's still some immaturity with a lot of them, I think it'll be interesting to see how things go for them as the series progresses and as I get further into it. So, talking about a few specific characters, I want to talk about Cersei Lannister. She is probably the most manipulative character in this book. She and her brother lover are gross, and I honestly believe that her husband had to know that her kids were, not his kids. The only person that I don't like more than her is Joffrey. He's a little shithead. He's so full of crap, I'm surprised his eyes aren't brown. He is just disgusting. Like, he sits here and lies to everybody and thinks he can get away with it because now that his daddy's dead, he's the king. So why not chop off Ned's head and sentence Sansa to sit in a prison cell for however long? I mean, he's just gross. He's arrogant. And he's only like 14. And I think to myself, how is it possible that a teenager could be this arrogant? But here we are. Sansa, that sweet summer child, she is so young, she's so naive, she's a 12, and yet she's like, hey, I want to get betrothed to Joffrey. And I think that shows how immature she is that she wants to get betrothed to Joffrey, of all people, and thinks that he loves her because he keeps saying stuff like, oh, you're so beautiful. And then he'll have the hound beat the shit out of her. And then he'll tell her, I love you. It's okay. I love you. Here's a flower. And she'll just fawn over it. It's an abusive relationship. And they're children. And the thing that felt the weirdest to me was that it's a world where characters can get married and live into their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. So why are the children getting betrothed to each other? Like, you could make a different choice there. It's just wild. And it's interesting to see what she learns about the royal family. I think she is still pretty naive at the end of the book, but she learns a bit more about who they really are and what they expect and what they'll do to get their way. And hopefully she keeps picking up on things like that and gains a little more street sense, like her sister Arya. She's precious and she's fierce. And I think if she had the chance, like if she wasn't a girl, she could rule that whole world someday. She reminds me a little bit of a medieval times Ramona Quimby, if that makes sense to you, if you're old enough to remember Ramona Quimby. She's really energetic, but she likes to be the center of attention because she's a kid. And she has, like Sansa, she's got a strong personality. And I think that will be her biggest asset in the whole series. But King Robert, he's a selfish pig. He let everything go to his head as soon as he became king. And the more you learned about him, and especially him and Lord Renly, you know why he wanted to name Renly the heir to his throne, even though Stannis should have been the next in line because he's older than Renly. I mean, he married Cersei, and he had to know what she was like. He can do whatever he wants, but it's a weird choice to marry into a family that's obviously incredibly volatile. And to, I don't know. But, like I said, he can do whatever he wants and brush things off as long as Cersei gives him enough privacy to put his hot dog in whatever bun he wants. Tyrion, however, Cersei's brother, I actually like him. He's a little shit. He's mean. He's nasty. He's volatile. He does questionable things, but I have to ask at what cost and for what reason. Somebody made a joke. Stannis made a joke in the next book about being the most ethical person in the entire kingdom. And I just had to laugh because at least within the Lannister family and within the people who know them, and I know Stannis and Tyrion are only brothers-in-law, but I mean, and I think that Tyrion may be the most ethical person out of that little group. Jon Snow, I felt sort of bad for him in a way because he just gets crapped on his whole life, and then he gets sent to the wall by Catelyn because, I mean, Catelyn can hold a grudge. And her husband was porking somebody else, and here came Jon, or at least that's the rumor, And when he gets to the wall, I like that he sort of develops a little bit more character, a little bit more of an upstanding kind of person. Because I see the way that he gets treated by the other boys and the way the other boys treat him and Samwell. And the way that he treats Sam is really sweet because he actually gets the other boys, like he basically tries to kick the crap out of them to get them to be nice to Sam because he knows that Sam is just a good kid. He treats Arya like she's a real person and treats her with respect instead of treating her like her only job is to be a lady who gets married and bears babies for her man, I mean, I know that that's kind of the expectation of a highborn girl in those times, but if you have a child that is like, that's not for me, find something that is for them. There had to be a way. I think Jon sets a good example of how to balance fierceness and softness inside of himself, and I think that'll make his character arc in this series much more interesting. And poor little Bran, we see so much of him throughout the book, and I think that his development and growth mostly is going to come in the other books, though, because in this book, he's still sort of ruminating about the fact that he got pushed out of a castle because of what he saw and got knocked unconscious for how long and in a coma and, it is what it is, but it's the shits. I loved the world building here, so let's talk about that next. The world is huge. You go, oh, here's Westeros, but here's the north, and here's the wall at the north, and here's all the stuff down south and the castles, and the way that George R. R. Martin built up everything from Flea Bottom to King's Landing to Winterfell to the land where the Dothraki lived was incredible. I mean, he really did a good job of layering these worlds together, making everything, showing the differences between where the Dothraki live and talking about the Iron Islands and Winterfell and the North and the castle and in the castle in the north, Castle Black and Casterly Rock and all these different places, and builds everything up so that each little part of this world feels like its own distinct place. Like if I was traveling from Minnesota to San Francisco, oh, it's different here. You can tell that, and he does a good job of building that up. The thing that got me was the way he described the Eyrie. Why would anybody want to live there? Why would you want to do that? Do you like being tortured? I mean, I also appreciate that there's a lot of foreshadowing in this book. If you've seen the TV show, it's not even comparison because the TV show changes things after the first season. The first season they're mostly, but then they get into season 2 and things diverge a lot. And by the end of the series, it's just they did their own things, So reading the book was really helpful. I have very few qualms about George R. R. Martin, and I know he built a world that can show us something like Dany getting pregnant and send us 3 apparently dead dragon eggs. Not tell us what they're for, but obviously we know because he can link everything to a head at the same time that her husband dies and they burn his body. And taking things about Bran getting pushed off that window, and we see hints of what's going to happen to him in the future. He'll say little things that just leave you thinking, that kid knows what's going on. It's not enough. It's not a lot, but it's enough to keep the story moving and to keep your mind thinking, this is going to, you pinpoint it in your mind and you're like, yeah, what he said here or what these people just talked about here is all going to lead up to big things in later books. They vaguely mentioned that Lord Renly married Marjorie Tyrell. So, that's coming in later books. And that you're going to get to see them actually in person. It's a really information-heavy book, which I expect with fantasy books, especially ones that are, 800 pages and take place in this medieval world that he had to build up. And I can only imagine that the amount of outlining he had to do was outrageous, but he is a good writer. And the things that I really loved about this book, other than what I've already mentioned, I love the relationship that Arya and Jon have together. They're my favorite characters, and I just like them. I like the way that this story showed Arya growing up, at least a little bit. And we know we're at the beginning of her transition from this well-cared-for, high-born girl into the girl that she becomes over the course of the series. So it'll be interesting to see her character arc. I really love the Lannisters. While I hate that the Lannisters are currently holding Sansa hostage, I think she'll gain a lot of political knowledge and hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully the experience will help her develop a sense of cunning and strategy and help her learn more about herself. I have a few hesitancies about what'll happen because I know some of the characters that get introduced later in the series are absolutely horrific, but time will tell. I like the hints that we get through Bran's world because like I said, we see those little bits of him thinking or talking about the birds or making little one-off comments that you know are going to become important later. And I think it's really good to see those little hints. I like that George R. R. Martin treats his readers like they're smart and gives little hints of foreshadowing instead of just telling us what's going to fucking happen, because it really bothers me when authors treat their readers like we're stupid. I hate Joffrey Lannister with every fiber of my being, but when I look at him, I think it shows, like, comparing him to other people, it shows that George Martin can write characters really well, and it shows how many people hate this greedy little punk. Right now, the only characters I can think of that I hate more than him are Zayd Meadows from Hunting Adeline and Adam from The Perfect Marriage. And Dany, dear Dany, I have nothing to hate about her at all. I loved her ending. I loved her character arc in this book. I can't wait to see her raise those dragons and torch the whole world. Like, I think it was great. So, if you've read this book and you have anything you want to share about it or comment about it, leave me a comment, share this video, have fun, and tell me what you're reading right now.